If I look at the human literature and I ignore all the confounding and I say, I'm just looking at this epidemiological literature. Go to the gym, do some aerobics, lift weights, build muscle, eat all the protein you can, get stronger, have the most muscle you can, the most strength you can, the opposite of what I see in the news.
Welcome to Longevity by Design, a podcast designed to give individuals access to the leading scientific information in the field of longevity. The ability to add years to your life and life to your years needs no opinion. Join us as we ask science to take the wheel. In each episode, Dr. Gil Blander joins a co-host and an industry expert in the field of longevity, shining a light and getting the answers to the key question: how can we live a longer, healthier life?
Hello, I'm Dr. Gil Blander. Welcome to Longevity by Design. How to live a longer, healthier life. We are produced by InstaTracker, your science-based guide to optimize your body from the inside out. Our guest today is Dr. David Allison, one of the world's most influential and rigorous scientists in the field of obesity, nutrition, and health research. Dr. Allison is the Dean and Provost Professor at the Indiana University School of Public Health, Bloomington, and Director of the USDA Children Nutrition Research Center at Baylor College of Medicine. A psychologist and biostatistician by training, he has authored hundreds of peer-reviewed scientific publications and has been continuously funded by the National Institute of Health for more than 25 years. Widely recognized for his expertise in obesity, weight regulation, clinical trial, statistical methodology, and research integrity, Dr. Allison is also a leading voice for rigor, reproducibility, transparency, and trustworthiness in scientific research and communication, and manage a popular weekly newsletter about it called Obesity and Energetic Offering, which I am a recipient of. He is a member of the National Academy of Medicine and recipient of numerous awards for his scholarship, mentorship, and commitment to advancing evidence-based science. David, welcome to Longevity by Design.
Well, thank you, Gil. It is a pleasure to be here with you, sir. Honored to be invited. I do wish to clarify one thing. I was the dean at Indiana University of the School of Public Health. I finished my term there. My full-time position is now as the director of the USDA ARS Children's Nutrition Research Center at Baylor College of Medicine and Texas Children's Hospital, but I maintain a courtesy appointment as a faculty member at Indiana University.
Okay, thank you so much for the correction, well received. And before we'll dive in, if you enjoy Longevity by Design, please like, follow, and leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. It's help others find this science-first conversation. So, David, I would like to start with your approach for rigor, reproducibility, and trustworthiness in science. And as I discussed in the introduction, you have been one of the strongest voice calling for that. Why is this especially critical in nutrition, exercise, and longevity research?
Certainly. So the quest for greater rigor and reproducibility and transparency and ultimately epistemologic trustworthiness. Can we trust the studies to be telling us what we need to hear? This goes back to the very beginning of science. Science itself is a bias reduction procedure. It's a way of trying to bring in ever greater objectivity. And it brings in that objectivity by its methods. Right? We often say that in science, three things matter: the data, the methods used to produce the data, which give them their probative value, which tell us their meaning, and the logic connecting those data and methods to conclusions. That's it. That's science. Everything else is something else. And since the dawn of science, there have been rigor problems. Ptolemy, it's not clear that all of his data were clean data. Pasteur selectively published. Mendel seemed to fudge some data. So these go back a long way, but we know that we're always getting better. Now, why is it important now? And why is it especially important in nutrition and in longevity? Well, it's especially important now because we're at a point where we need the science more than ever, and because while there's not a crisis in my view in the sense that things have gotten much worse or about to collapse, there is a point at which people say, you know what, enough's enough. Maybe it's better than it used to be, but it's still not good enough. We want a quantum leap up. And I think the American public and the public overall beyond America has said, we want a quantum leap. There's a lot of parties in politics that also make it more sensitive and more important so that we can trust each other, trust the data. Both sides of the political divide in the United States have made mistakes in talking about evidence that have led the other side to be less trustful. So we need to get past that. And to do that, before we ask to be trusted, we have to be trustworthy. Now, in nutrition, it's not clear. We don't have evidence that the data are less trustworthy than they are elsewhere. I have some suspicions that in certain areas they are. But what we do know is that the general public, from surveys done by, for example, the Pew Charitable Trust, show that they do trust nutrition science less than they trust other fields of science. So we have a perception problem, regardless of whether the data are really more trustworthy or not. So we need to work very hard on this. With respect to aging, it's similar. We know that there's rock solid, cutting edge, exciting science going on, but we also know that aging is often the field of charlatans. It's the field of people selling snake oil. And for the general public, it's sometimes hard to tell the difference between them. And so the bad behavior of the snake oil salespeople may reflect on the good behavior of the rigorous scientists. And so we need to work on making the science rigorous, but also helping to portray the science in a way that allows other people to discern its trustworthiness.
So switching gear to another subject, you published in the past on a term that called food noise. So how do you define it scientifically, and what does the evidence actually say about that?
Real excited to be able to talk with you about this. Food noise is a variable, a construct that likely existed for perhaps since people existed. We don't know for sure, but we think so. But it really came to be something we recognized only in the last couple of years. And it was the GLP-1 agonists, more than anything else, that brought that recognition to the fore. Even before the GLP-1 agonists were so popular, I had heard anecdotally from other people who had taken some sort of appetite-suppressing drug that suddenly this tickling at the back of their skull, as they described it, sort of the tickling in the brainstem almost, these are all metaphorical things, was going away. They could sit at a restaurant, have dinner, and at the end say, I'm done, and that was a reasonable amount, and not have something rolling constantly in their mind saying, you got to be able to push away, you got to be able to push away. It's hard. What's next? It was just easy. So it just pushed away. They weren't thinking about it day and night. When's my next meal? Am I going to have enough? How am I going to deal with hunger, etc.? But when the GLP-1 agonist came, it really seemed to just hit everybody. This was not subtle. And somebody, I don't know who first did it, but somebody introduced the term food noise, wasn't me. But we quickly recognized it. And so we jumped on it at the right time, and we produced a new measure of it, which is called the Roe, Allison, Indiana, Durander Food Noise Inventory, RAID-FM. And we've published 2 papers on it. We have a third in review that was just posted. That's a Spanish language version of it, posted in one of the archives publicly, if people want it. And we're now doing much testing. So we're testing it in many populations, many circumstances, and the information is starting to roll out. We're looking at the association with simple demographic things, age, race, sex, etc. We're starting to look at, is it reduced by GLP-1 agonist treatment and other treatments? We're pretty confident it is reduced by GLP-1 agonist treatments, but we want to show those data. We're showing that it's reliable. That's been demonstrated very clearly at this point. We've got it translated into Spanish, so both Spanish and English versions are available, but we're trying to generate about 10 other languages, including Turkish, Chinese or Mandarin, Hindu, and so forth. So a lot of exciting stuff going on there. And we're looking at it for everything from, is it an indication meriting treatment on its own, right? So suppose you have somebody who says, I mean, frankly, I'm one of these people. I get a lot of food noise. I'm hungry all the time, but I'm not obese. I don't need to lose weight. I don't want to lose weight. But is it an appropriate indication? Just to, give you some peace of mind, some control of that food noise. Is that a legitimate treatment goal? How does this affect distractibility? How does it affect the ability of a sentry in the Army to not get distracted at 5 o'clock in the morning because they're thinking about food? How does it affect driving safety? So we're actually working with somebody who does driving safety. And we're going to measure food noise in people who are driving. And this investigator has all these things that measure exactly how people are driving in real settings. So very exciting research going on, much work to be done.
So from what you know so far, how much of it is biology versus environment versus psychology?
It's funny, I hear people talk about that a lot, and people often say things like, well, we've now shown there's a genetic influence on obesity, or there's this physiologic difference between persons with and without obesity, or something physiologic happens when you lose weight, or this drug affects things. And all of that shows that there's a physiology to this and that it's not just psychology. And to me, all of that's nonsense. It all has no meaning. The idea of saying, is this not biological or physiological? Meaning what? I have a disembodied soul. I have a body, you have a body. We live in a physical world. Nothing happens, as far as I'm concerned, nothing happens in this body that's not physical. If you say you did a behavior, you had a thought, you had a feeling, an anatomic, physiological, behavioral thing happened in my body or with my body, and that's physiological. So I don't think those are right. Now, that could also that doesn't mean things aren't influenced by things outside the body that we don't typically think of as physiological. Like if I'm driving past a fast food restaurant, I see the sign. Does that affect things? I would say it still affects things through physiology, but also through psychology. So they're not contradictory. So there's nothing without physiology.
Yeah.
But yes, a lot of it could be due to these external factors, and we're still studying that now. That's part of, for example, the driving study we want to do is how much is food noise influenced by what you're driving by?
Yeah. We don't live in a lab that we can be in the cage for 4 weeks. And then we have a lot of other co-founder, I would say, that actually influence our life. And,
Absolutely.
Co-variant, sorry. Excellent. Thank you so much for explaining that. And staying with weight loss and weight regain and so on, you proposed in the past the dentistry model of weight management, where basically weight loss, like dental care, require ongoing maintenance. So it's not like one hit and at once. Can you elaborate about that a bit?
Absolutely. Earlier, you asked me about rigor. And part of the idea of rigor is questioning our assumptions. And what we see in many areas of science, but especially in aspects of health and especially in aspects of nutrition and longevity, we see that people often make assumptions. We all kind of jump on board and adopt them because they appeal to our preconceptions, or they seem to make sense, or they appeal to our moral philosophies or tastes. And later we say, we all believe that, and now maybe it's not there. Think HDL cholesterol. We used to think it's the good cholesterol. Now we kind of think it's the neutral cholesterol. It's not protective. Think alcohol. 1990s, 2000s, the epidemiologists, much of the public health community are saying modest alcohol consumption is helpful for you, will reduce your risk of problematic diseases. Very confidently. Now, people are saying no amount of alcohol is safe. A little might not be terrible, but none is best. There's no benefit. So there's lots of things that turn over like this. Saturated fats are being re-looked at and so forth. And I think here what we find is that there's this bias toward slow and steady, this, almost a Protestant work ethic kind of thing. You have to earn it. You have to suffer a little bit. We hear people often putting down the use of anti-obesity medications, especially the GLP-1 agonists, almost as though people aren't working hard enough. They're not suffering enough. They're taking the easy way out. No.
It's still hard for them.
That's still hard. And what's wrong with taking something that makes life easier? What's wrong with being comfortable? In any case, so going back to this, what we know is that some people can't easily keep weight loss off. That's less true when they get something like bariatric surgery or they take a drug and stay on the drug. But if they come off the drug or they do any lifestyle treatment, it's very hard to keep the weight off. And many have come out and said, maybe it's better to just not lose weight at all because this yo-yo dieting, this seesaw, this cycling is too much strain on a person. And epidemiologic studies do show that people who go up and down in weight have a higher mortality rate, meaning don't live as long, as people who are more steady. Correlation does not equal causation. We all know it. We hear it over and over again. Sometimes we take it seriously, and sometimes we seem to ignore it. In this case, many people ignore it. I think this accords again with that sort of moral panic about, you must suffer, you must keep it slow and steady, you can't do radical things. But then you look at the data and you say, when you start to do your best as a statistician to really get rid of all the confounding and other factors involved, it doesn't look so bad. It starts to look neutral. That is the weight cycling. Maybe not great, but neutral. Now, if you say, let's get out of the human observational epidemiologic world where it's hard to figure anything out, to be quite frank, unless it's a huge effect. Now let's go to the mouse world where we can get tight control. And we've done this in my own research group. We've let mice become obese, then we randomize them to different conditions. Either they stay obese or they come way down, or they go up and down, up and down, up and down. But the composition of the diet stays the same. And we've done it with high fat and low fat. And you know what? The composition of the diet doesn't really matter. At least the variations we use don't matter much. But weight cycling is much better for the mouse. They live longer than staying steadily obese. And they live almost the same, about as long, maybe even an iota longer in some cases, than the mouse that's brought back down to the same average weight that keeps it steady. So losing half the excess weight for the mouse and then keeping it off is no better than going up and down, so that on average, the mouse is about halfway there. Now, let's think about dentistry, okay? I go to the dentist tomorrow, let's say, and I see the hygienist. And the hygienist says, you have a little bit of gunk on your teeth, a little plaque, a little calculus, a little tartar. And he or she then scrapes it all off. And let's imagine that they have an exquisitely accurate scale. And I step on the scale before they scrape it all off, and I step on the scale after they scrape it all off. They say, you went down X milligrams. You lost the excess gunk weight on your teeth of X milligrams. And they say, now, here's a toothbrush. Here's some piece of floss, a little string. Go home, use them for the next 6 months, and then come back. I go home, I do my best, come back 6 months later, gunk is back. They scrape it off again. They say, you regained all the weight. Scrape it off again. And that's what happens, up and down every 6 months. And nobody says dentistry is a failure. Don't go and get your teeth cleaned. They say The stuff comes back. You better come back every 6 months. We say it's okay. Try your best with the toothbrush and the string, but it won't really work all that well. You'll still get the gunk back. Come back in 6 months, we'll scrape it off again. Why can't we do that with weight? Hypothetically, I go to my physician or my provider, and they say, come on into the inpatient unit. We'll put you in the spa if your insurance or we or you can afford it. We'll give you some meal replacement formula, some extra, you lose weight. Or here's a strong medication. You lose weight for 6 months, but maybe you can't afford it or don't want to take it for more than 6 months. So you take it for 6 months. You lose a lot of the weight. Try your best, and then slowly over the next 3 to 5 years, it'll come back in. We'll do it again for you. We'll care for you. And maybe it'll actually be good for you.
Yeah. So a couple of follow-up questions. One of them is about the magnitude of the effect of the yo-yo, as you called it. What percentage of humans that are losing weight will gain it, I don't know, 2 years or 5 years later? Do you have some numbers about that?
That depends upon how they lose the weight and how that's maintained. So if they lose the weight through bariatric surgery or through an effective drug like a GLP-1 agonist related drug, and they stay on the drug, that's key, and they stay on the drug, then I don't know the precise answer, but it is a large proportion of people who seem to be able to keep much of the weight off, not 100%, but much. In contrast, if they lose weight through other mechanisms, lifestyle, diet, exercise, the majority will gain back most of the weight by 3 to 5 years. And by majority, 90-95%. It's in that neighborhood.
So it's a major majority. It's like almost everyone will gain it back. So if someone thinking about losing weight, and keeping it low for longer, it's better to go for the GLP-1 drug or bariatric surgery than they do it on lifestyle and diet.
Yeah, I always try to be careful with things like better, because these are judgments, and better for what? It depends what your values are. How much can you afford it? How much is safety an issue? How much is comfort an issue? And those are personal judgments. But if you said, I just have one outcome here, my one outcome is weight loss maintenance.
Yeah.
Say, well, then yes, if the only thing of interest is weight loss maintenance, cost, side effects, comfort, et cetera aside, then I would say absolutely your best bet is bariatric surgery followed by a GLP-1 agonist that you stay on. That's the key, that you stay on.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Good clarification.
As a Longevity by Design podcast listener, you understand the value of improving your health for today and for all the years ahead. And if you want to live your healthiest, longest life possible, you need to understand what's going on inside. At Inside Tracker, we take a personalized approach to Healthspan optimization that eliminates guesswork from your wellness plan. Inside Tracker analyzes blood biomarker and DNA data, along with physiomarker data from fitness trackers like Oura Ring, to deliver personalized food, supplement, lifestyle, and exercise recommendations that allow you to take control and improve your health span. And for a limited time, Longevity by Design listeners can get 20% off at the Inside Tracker store. So if you're ready to receive a personal health analysis and data-driven wellness plan to optimize your body for the long haul, then it's time to start inside. Visit insidetracker.com/podcast to get started today. That's insidetracker.com/podcast to get started today.
My next question is about your discussion about my study that you have done with, let's say, the yo-yo diet. And my question is, it's always a combination, or how to know what is how much can we transfer from data from my study to human. And also, if we want to add, to make it even more complex, you spoke also about observational study. So how much can we take from observational study in order to be sure that it's a causation and no correlation? So if you can discuss, I know that it's very tense subject and it's very hard, but if there is one person that can answer this question, is you. So I would love to hear your input on that.
Well, I'm not sure anybody can answer it, but I think it comes down to degrees of certainty. In science, especially empirical science, there's no absolute certainty. Things change, but there's sufficient certainty for everyday life. And when do we get sufficiently certain to say, yes, we know this? An example I might give is statins, lower LDL cholesterol and have positive beneficial effects on cardiometabolic risk and lifespan. I think we know it at this point. It's not an open question. And I think when we do that is when things really line up. Now, ideally, you've got the double-blind, randomized, placebo-controlled trials telling you what you want to know. But in some cases, that's not possible or practical, right? Because of the length of time it would take, the number of people, getting control over the variable, right? We can randomize people to take a pill or not. We can't randomize people exactly to have their weight go up and down. We can randomize them to a treatment that we think will make their weight go up and down, but that's not the same as randomizing them to have their weight go up and down. That occurs later. So even in humans, it's hard to do the perfect randomized trial. We know that some things generalize from the mouse very well, and some things don't. Rafa de Cabo from the National Institute on Aging has a paper, which I'm a co-author of, which says failure to translate. And it talks about the idea that the effect of, or the association of serum blood glucose in mice, for example, with longevity is positive, meaning the higher the glucose level, the longer they live. In non-human primates and humans, it's the opposite. So some things don't really translate so well, and some things do. Therefore, we can be most confident when we see a confluence of results. When you look at the observational epidemiology and the animal model research and whatever human randomized trials there are, even if they're short-term, let's say, and everything seems to line up, then we can be very confident. What we see is, in general, people who lose weight have improvements in many, many health indicators, including things related to longevity, suggesting that that works. If and when they regain the weight, much of that comes back, but they don't seem worse off. In the mouse, looks good to lose and regain the weight compared to staying obese, not compared to being lean the whole time. Being lean the whole time, never getting obese is the best in the mouse. So you've got some confluence there. When we look at longer term studies, we don't have the weight cycling per se, but we do have the weight loss. And at this point, it's very clear that people who are randomized to SGLT2 inhibitors, GLP-1 agonists, bariatric surgery, all of which cause weight loss, live longer, have lower mortality rates. I think at this point, we're starting to get the data to line up. Is there enough openness to say, still have some questions, still some maybe there? Absolutely. But does the data strongly lean toward, if one is obese, weight loss prolongs life? At this point, very strongly. On the weight cycling thing, does it say if you're obese and you do this dentistry model with weight cycling, you'll live longer than if you stay obese? Little less evidence. I think we should do some trials in humans to look at that. We may not be able to look at longevity, but we look at least general health, actually randomizing people to try to cycle or not cycle. But I think right now the evidence to me leans a little bit toward the positive that we know of, but not absolute.
Thank you so much. That was a good explanation for that. And now let's talk about a subject that at least is also exciting to me, in nutrition, and that's exercise. And a lot of scientists, general audience, assume that exercise clearly increases lifespan. You publish a work in rodent and human that suggests the answer is might be much more complex. Can you walk us through that?
Sure. I'll preface this by saying I myself am a regular exerciser. I go to the gym almost every day, and I like it. And I think the evidence in humans that some form of exercise, most forms of exercise, improve many aspects of health is virtually incontrovertible at this point. That is, if you said, are there forms of exercise that reduce cardiometabolic risk factors? Absolutely. That have positive effects on mental health, so on. Seems very clear. But people often leap to exercise will make you live long. And a common thing now among particularly the podcasters, but also people who write about this in peer-reviewed trials, is talking about the idea that strength, being stronger will make you live longer, having more muscle mass will make you live longer, and doing the resistance training that gets you the greatest strength and muscle mass will have you live longer. And people then say which one they think is going to have the bigger influence. But if you look at it, it's all based on observational epidemiology. That is on the longevity part, not on the short-term health benefits. With one exception, I would say there's no randomized controlled trial in humans that shows that any form of exercise prolongs life convincingly. Now, there was a recent trial published in New England Journal among cancer survivors. It's a particular type of cancer. It's people of a particular condition. It's one study. Interesting, impressive extensions in lifespan or reductions in mortality rate with the exercise, but doesn't really tell us what happens in the general public. Tells us that particular kind of cancer survivor. And you might say, well, let's go to the animal studies then. There is not a single study in any animal that I know of, including but not limited to humans, that convincingly shows that any form of exercise prolongs life. There's people sometimes cite an old small rat study by John Hollisey, which purportedly showed that in the first half of life, approximately, exercise seemed to reduce mortality rate, whereas in the second half of life, it seemed to increase it. So it's kind of a wash overall, but there was a slight extension of the median lifespan. This is a very weak, small study, never replicated. Beyond that, you've got data from Ted Garland's group showing the opposite, apparently. You've got lots of rodent studies, not lots, other rodent studies not showing an effect of exercise. In terms of resistance exercise, my friend Dudley Lamming at University of Wisconsin tells me that, and he's one of the experts on this, the longest implementation of resistance training in rodents ever reported is 16 weeks. So we don't have lifelong resistance training data in any animal species. And so all of this is very speculative. If you look at the data coming out from, let's say, Jaakko Caprio's group in Finland, where they'll take, for example, identical twins and say, do people who report exercising more live longer? The answer is yes. Then they'll say, okay, among monozygotic twins who are now matched for genes, and in most cases for a rearing environment, that is, they grew up together, you see you've eliminated that confounding. Does the twin who exercises more live longer than the twin who doesn't exercise more? And the answer is not so much. If you look at the Mendelian randomization studies, which strengthen causal inferences under some assumptions, they make it look like a lot of the association between exercise and longevity in humans is due to confounding. It is not causal. Now, I don't think we've proven that it's not, that exercise doesn't prolong life, but I think there are lots of reasons to doubt. And when you take all that into account, it is striking from that social point of view. It goes back to that trustworthiness. The different standards we will hold for exercise versus other things. And so, people will say, well, with this diet or this other factor, it could be confounding. It could be this. It could be reporting bias. It could be whatever. Exercise will make you live longer. Free pass. Intellectually, epistemologically. And I think that's okay if you say, well, I have a prior reason to have a stronger belief that is plausible. But then say that. Let people know that you're bringing in your subjective probabilities here. You're being a closet Bayesian.
Yeah, and I just to follow up on that, I've seen a lot of influencers around us that really believe in exercise, and they are actually talking badly about nutrition, and that's what happened in real life. And then the audience is confused, and they follow basically the influencer. But if we are going back to the exercise. So you said, okay, it's not clear whether it's increased lifespan. What about health span? Does it increase the health span or not?
If I had to put my money down as a betting man, I would say yes. If you ask me, has it been unequivocally demonstrated beyond a reasonable doubt? No. I think it increases health. Whether it increases health span, not quite identical. We're not sure. Even the idea that treatments that extend lifespan will also extend health span and result in so-called compression of morbidity is open to question. Dipendra Thapa, who's a postdoctoral fellow in my group, has just published a paper on compression of morbidity. He points out that in the longevity community, it's commonly assumed that, or is commonly asserted that the things that will make us live longer won't just lead to longer lives filled with disability and escalating medical costs. That in fact, the reverse will be true. They will lead to a shortening of the disability time proportional to the total lifespan. And that's compression of morbidity. But when we actually look at the evidence, it's not, first of all, there's no mathematical logical necessity that would occur. So it's an empirical question. And when you look at the evidence, both in mouse and in human, sometimes it looks like things that prolong life also prolong health span and reduce the period of morbidity, such that you get compression of morbidity. Sometimes they don't.
So what kind of experiment would you do in order to prove that or disprove that exercise or being in a better shape increase health span? What will be the experiment?
In a short-lived species like a mouse, it would be pretty easy. You administer the treatment. You probably want to administer it lifelong, but you could do it at different ages. And then you carefully measure health span and lifespan and be relatively intellectually, conceptually, be expensive study, but a straightforward study to do, clearly doable. And people are doing things related to that now. In human, it's real tough because of the duration. So if we randomize people and we say, well, let's start them at age 20, let's randomize them and study them, I'll be dead long before that study's ever complete.
Yeah.
And I don't think we want to wait 70 years for the answer to the question. So if we really want to get at it, we'll either need to make some extrapolations from data collected over 3, 5, et cetera year period. But if we were to start people at different ages, right? So some of the cohort starts at age 20 and we follow them until age 25, let's say. Some start at age 25 and we follow them to age 30, all the way up through much later years. And we see a consistent pattern. That is that the effect seems more or less the same if we administer to 20-year-olds versus 80-year-olds. And it's always reducing mortality rate in the next 5 years. I think we can start to say that seems like it increases lifespan, even though we haven't done a full lifespan study. And then in terms of health span, we would have to do a similar thing, but that's a little harder to extrapolate. Probably best to do it in people starting at the older age, but then you are starting late with the exercise. but at least you've got the opportunity to observe Healthspan.
Yeah. What about Mendelian randomization? Can that help, or you don't think that we can use that method?
I think we can use it for sure.
Yeah.
I think it would help. It's always like anything else. It's what are you prepared to assume? So as with all scientific evidence, it's the inference of causation is conditional upon assumptions. What can you rule out? As Descartes, famously said, cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. That's the one thing he knew. If he could think, if he could ask the question, there must be an I to ask the question. So I know I exist. But if I'm really strict, I don't know you exist. I don't know the world exists. I don't know that I existed 5 minutes ago. Maybe I just came into existence in the last minute. Maybe I'm just a brain in a vat controlled by an evil scientist. All of that I don't know. Now, at some point we say, well, let's just accept that you exist and that I've been here more than 5 minutes, and more or less what I think is the world. And we build from there. It's all a matter of what you can rule out. So there, I can't even rule out the brain of the vat thing, but I rule it out. It just doesn't seem plausible. Right? Same thing with anything else. As you progress through Mendelian randomization, randomized controlled trials, etc., there are different threats. There are different alternative explanations for causation that you can rule out. So the Mendelian randomization allows you to rule out a little more than an observational epidemiologic study, but it's still based on assumptions.
Yeah. Speaking on which, now protein is very in fashion, I would say. I can see pasta with protein, and I don't know, whatever you want today, you have with protein. And there is a lot of debate around us about how many gram per kilogram of body mass should we consume in order to build muscle and in order to maintain muscle. Any opinion or any evidence from your side about that, or it's something that you don't want to get into?
Well, I love talking about protein. It's fun. I'm a huge protein aficionado, and I use that word pointedly because many people will, I think, correctly say, do we really need, and I'm underlining the word need now, do I really need huge levels of protein? Do I need to make 90% of my diet protein, which of course is close to possible, 90% of my energy? Do I really need to eat greater than 3 grams per kilogram every day? Be extremely difficult to do that. But there are people like me who say, well, let's see how close I can get. And in there is some game. So if somebody said to me, do you really need to go to a fancy coffee shop and spend a lot of money on this special grind or blend of coffee? No. Do you really need to drink red wine and a $500 bottle of it and swish it around and talk about the nuttiness and the flavors? No. But some people think it's fun. And if you got the money and you got the time and it appeals to you, more power to you. Right? So my feeling is that there's no harm in going up. People talk about this a lot. We think this is a tremendous exaggeration, back to the trustworthiness. If you find the papers that say, if you go above X grams per kilogram or per pound of body weight, then it might be too high and it's not safe. You say, okay, let's go back to the references that they cite that point that out. You go back to them. We've done this. What you find is those papers reference other papers. They don't have it. You go back until when you find data, what you usually find, all we've been able to find, is somebody says, well, we fed people this very high level of protein, let's say 3.5 kilograms per kilogram of body weight, which is way high. And we didn't observe any negative health effects. So up to 3.5 really would be safe. Above that, not safe. Well, no, you didn't show that above it, it's not safe. You just showed you couldn't find an unsafe level as long as you looked at that. So we know of no evidence that even in people with chronic kidney disease, that there's some level of protein intake that's too high. So therefore, if you want to go as high as you want to go, have fun. Now, do you need to go? Can I show you benefit? It says if you go above a certain level, you will get additional benefit. That's where it gets shaky. We know that there is what appears to be a monotonic dose-response relationship. Monotonic meaning it doesn't change direction. So the more protein you eat, all other things being equal, the more muscle you tend to build. We never see it go down. But at a certain point, this work is largely attributable to Stu Phillips' group through meta-analyses. It looks like somewhere around 1.2 grams per kilogram of body weight. You don't get a lot of increased skeletal muscle or lean. It's really lean body mass accretion if you take more. But the slope of the line is still upward. Never goes down. It's not completely flat. So is there a benefit? I think so. I think it's probably a curve that asymptotes lower than 100% or whatever it is. Probably not a lot of benefit after 1.2-ish grams per kilogram, but no harm, small benefit. For people like me, average person going to the gym, wants to have a little more muscle, is it going to make much difference? Probably not a big difference. Just working out 10% more would probably be a bigger difference. But if you're trying to win the Olympics or a bodybuilding competition, and every iota helps, yeah, it's probably a good idea. Stu is working on some new data, trying to refine those estimates further. But right now, sort of a consensus among the people who think the higher protein levels are a little bit better is go to at least 1.2, go up to 2.2 if you can, 2 or 2.2. And after that, have fun if you want, but probably not a big benefit. The new Dietary Guidelines of America, just released in the last, less than 2 weeks, have increased the recommended amount of protein, as many of us thought for a long time should be done. What happened was the status quo became reified. That is, people had to unseat the status quo, and folks would say, well, is the evidence for increased benefit of higher protein intake convincing enough to show that it's unequivocally or reasonably unequivocally true? Well, not quite. They said, well, therefore we'll stick with the old one. We said, well, does the evidence show that that's unequivocally true or better? Heck no. And if you said, well, where's just the balance of evidence? Well, it's toward the higher level. And so thankfully that won out. Now, what's interesting also is where that lands in terms of the idea of special populations. For a long time, the mantra was, the RDA is okay for the general public. You still hear this today, many nutrition people. But Americans get plenty of protein anyway. They're all getting enough anyway. They're all meeting the RDA. So, okay, maybe for bodybuilders, maybe for, somebody recovering from chemotherapy, et cetera, you need more protein. Well, I was talking with my friend, Peter Attia, and we were talking about this, and I said, yes, of course. The average person, the RDA is fine. But for some special populations, like bodybuilders, et cetera, I start going through the litany, people over age 50. And he said, David, you say bodybuilder. It makes people think of, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Olympic. He said, you go to the gym. Are you going to the gym to get less muscle? No, of course not. So you like to have more muscle? Yeah, of course. He said, so you're a bodybuilder. Okay, well, if you use that definition, you're right. And he said, let's take everybody who goes to the gym and tries to preserve or build muscle. Now let's take everybody over 50. Now let's take everybody who's pregnant. Now let's take everybody recovering from an injury. Now let's take everybody who's about to go to surgery. Now let's take everybody recovering from chemotherapy. Now let's take everybody who's growing. And you say, let's take everybody who's a serious exerciser. Gee, that seems like if you add all those categories up, anybody meets any one of those, that sounds like it might be the majority of the population. Maybe the exception is the people who don't need the higher level of protein, which is, I think, what's now being reflected.
Yeah.
It's very much flipping the question. I don't hear anybody say, well, there are some people for whom just rinsing their mouth out with water after dinner is not enough. For those rare individuals, we recommend that they brush their teeth at night. We say, no, we recommend everybody brush their teeth at night. And maybe there's some rare exception of somebody with some periodontal disease or something like that of a strange nature who shouldn't. But we talk about who shouldn't as the exception, not who should as the exception. And I think that's where we are with protein now. Higher levels of protein.
Yeah, so one follow-up question. You mentioned Dudley Lemming from Wisconsin, and he published a few interesting papers about actually that high protein, at least in animal models, from what I remember, especially branched-chain amino acid, can actually decrease lifespan in animal models. So what is your intake on that, and would that change what you told us so far?
Yeah, I'm very aware of Dudley's work, and he and I have talked a lot about it. It's important to note, it's in mice, that it is particular amino acids, branched chain amino acids, that is shown. The question is, how generalizable is it to both humans living under broader circumstances, right? Even these mice, these are mice living under very specialized circumstances, including the effects of protein and energy restriction seem to be very dependent on ambient temperature. And so, yes, in very specific circumstances, we can make the mouse live longer with calorie or protein restriction, but it may not generalize to other circumstances. So I think we have a long way to go. If I were to believe if I based my beliefs on what was good for me or another human to live longer, only from the mouse world, the world of mouse data or mouse and rat data, I would say, don't exercise, eat as little as you can, or to a point, calorically restrict, eat low protein, don't build a lot of muscle, right? Take drugs like rapamycin, which activate AMPK and downregulate mTOR and make you smaller and have less muscle, and you'll live longer. If I look at the human literature and I ignore all the confounding and I say, I'm just looking at this epidemiological literature, I say, go to the gym, do some aerobics, lift weights, build muscle, eat all the protein you can, get bigger, not bigger in terms of obese, get stronger, have the most muscle you can, the most strength you can, the opposite of what I see in the mouse.
Yeah. So that's a very good point, David. And going back to the mouse, there is so much data about caloric restriction and how it's increased lifespan in mice. And from what I've seen so far in human, the data is much weaker. Do you see evidence that caloric restriction in human can extend the lifespan? And you said before that even exercise doesn't show a strong evidence that increase the lifespan.
I see no evidence that meets conventional standards of saying beyond a reasonable doubt, we've proved it, right? So I could say beyond a reasonable doubt, we've shown that statins, SGLT2 inhibitors, GLP-1 agonists will extend life in humans. I can't say that for caloric restriction. It's plausible. Now, if you said to me, what's your best bet? Again, as a betting man, my best bet is caloric restriction would prolong life in humans.
So you believe it, but there is no evidence about it.
Right. So that the famous statistician Royale said, there's evidence to draw a scientific conclusion that beyond a reasonable doubt, this proposition is true. There's evidence to say, I believe this is true, but we haven't shown it yet.
Yeah.
And then there's evidence to say, I'm going to take this action or I'm going to recommend you take this action. Those are three different things. And so the standard of evidence for saying, I've shown this beyond reasonable doubt, in my view, and I think most of the scientific community is very high. No, we're not even close to that on caloric restriction. But if you said to me, do you believe it? Meaning, what's your best bet? Is it, do you think it's more plausible that caloric restriction would prolong life in humans versus not? Yes, I think it's more plausible than not that caloric restriction would prolong life in humans.
Okay. And another interesting evidence that happened this week is that the new administration decided to add full fat milk into the diet of the American. What is your opinion about that? Is it a good move? Is it a bad move? Because I heard a reaction in both sides about that.
Yeah. It's an interesting one. I'm still sort of trying to get my own head around that. And again, it goes back to good for what? So, is it good for the economy? Is it good for helping school lunch programs more effectively give children stuff they'll actually eat, or to give it less expensively? Is it good for people, making people feel better? Will it make people more likely to eat their dairy and therefore get the calcium? Whereas if you could get them to eat the other one, it might be better. But so all these things come into play. But if you just say, let's assume people eat it, right? And let's put the economy aside and the cost aside and preferences aside, and just say, what if you ate a fair bit of dairy in your diet that was full fat? What if you ate a fair bit of dairy in your diet that was not full fat? Mm-hmm. And by dairy, I'm going to say basically, I mean milk, yogurt, and cheese. A couple other things maybe, but I'm not talking about butter. That's an important distinction. I would say the evidence on balance suggests that there's not a lot of difference in cardiometabolic outcomes between the full fat and the low or zero fat. I still have a little trouble totally believing it, but that's where the evidence does indeed point. I can't decide if I'm having trouble believing it just because I've been told the opposite for so long, or because there's a good reason to not. Yeah. In my own life, I eat an enormous amount of dairy, probably well more than 50% of my food energy is coming from milk. What I don't mean directly, it's milk, yogurt, cheese, and if you think of all the protein powders, protein drinks, the protein bars, mostly, often, they're whey and or casein.
Yeah.
So, when I take a protein powder, I'm also drinking milk in some sense. And so, but in almost all cases, I personally am choosing the fat-free. So I'm eating an enormous amount of fat-free milk, yogurt, cheese. And among other things, that gives me greater satiety, right? So I get to eat a little more, which I like, and yet I'm not getting the fat. I seem to be doing all right.
Yes, so we at InstaTracker, we have a lot of data about more than 100,000 people, and some of them did also basically scan their food for a week, so we can know exactly what they consume. Is it a low fat, high fat, a middle fat? Is it milk versus cheese versus any other kind of dairy? It can be ice cream and so on. And we actually studied that and looked into that, and we couldn't find any difference between low fat and high fat. Again, maybe the statistic wasn't strong enough, so maybe there is some difference. The biggest difference that we have seen was between fermented dairy and non-fermented dairy. And we've seen that fermented dairy show a positive effect. And our outcome was basically blood biomarkers that basically look better. So what we have seen in our study, and again, it's not published, so it's not peer-reviewed, it's still internal, that actually fermented dairy is better for some blood biomarker, better for sleep also. We've seen it for sleep and also REM sleep, and we've seen it also when you measure biological age. So that's what we have seen.
Wonderful. I'd love to learn more, especially the ice cream part. I'm sure you know that there are studies showing beneficial associations, I underline the word associations,
Yeah.
between ice cream consumption and other health outcomes. The question is, could that be real? And maybe.
Yeah. Again, our study is all correlation, so it's not a
I love
clinical
ice
study
cream.
for. Yeah.
I hope
I
it's
love ice cream, so everyone like ice cream. Yeah. We
Our
have seen actually
Trevor
that.
Mackey says, I'm not sure that ice cream really does prevent diabetes, but out of an overabundance of caution, I'm eating as much ice cream as I can.
And you know, if you think about longevity and what are the pillars that at least today we believe that are allowing you to live better longer, is also being happy and feel good, and absolutely ice cream make you to feel better. There is some effect of feeling better that it's very hard to quantify it.
Absolutely. What would be the point of living if we didn't take feelings into account?
Exactly. So David, you mentioned about your diet that a lot of it comes from dairy and a lot of it coming basically from protein powders. In a way, some people are saying protein powder is something that is a processed food. I would like to hear your opinion about processed food. Is it, some people are saying, oh, it's evil, don't eat any processed food. Everything should come either from the cow or from the chicken or from the garden. But I assume that there is some balance. So I would love to hear your view about processed food. What is a good processed food? What is a bad processed food, if there is any?
So my feeling about the idea of people making statements about we should or shouldn't eat more processed, or sometimes, these were ultra processed, highly processed food. I think these are largely political, social, philosophical kinds of things, not scientific things. There's a book called A Fly in the Ointment, and the author's name is Fleiss. And in it, he has a wonderful statement. And he says, here's the mantra, repeat after me. The effect of substances in the body depends on their molecular structure, not their ancestry. So processing may affect the molecular structure of something, and through that may affect how we react to it when we eat it. But it's the product that has the effect, not the processing conditional upon the product of the substance. So we should be talking scientifically about the substances, not their ancestry. It doesn't matter how you got there. It matters what's in it, right? Otherwise, you're doing homeopathy, right? Otherwise, you're in mystical realm. Now, as a heuristic, if I were to say to you, Gil, you want to lose some weight, for example, don't eat anything that comes in a red package. Don't eat anything that comes from the center aisle of the supermarket. Only eat from the peripheral aisle. Or I want you to only eat food that contains a lot of hot sauce. And you just say, I can't eat that much if it has a lot of hot sauce. All of those things might work to make you lose weight, but none of those, with the possible exception of the hot sauce, are getting at the causative agent per se. They're just giving you a heuristic. So if you want to say to somebody, here's a heuristic. Don't eat these things we call ultra processed. And it works for you, fine. Just as if I said, don't eat anything your grandmother wouldn't recognize. That works for you, fine. If you say this is a scientific statement about understanding foods, no meaning here. So some processes are terrible, like lining the inside of your wine bottles with lead, which the Romans did. That's a bad process. Some processes, like, washing your food to get some microbes off, that's a good process. Heating your food to kill pathogens, good process. So, I think talking about the health effects of process versus unprocessed, tell me about the food.
Okay. So it's more like discuss a specific item. You cannot come and say all the processed food are good or bad. It's based on the specific kind of food. Makes sense. Okay. A few a quick rapid fire question that I would like to ask you is, the first one is one scientific claim in nutrition or exercise that is most overrated.
Or I think the claim that there is a certain way to eat such that if you eat in that manner without trying to restrict your calories, you will achieve the body weight you want to achieve comfortably. I think that's a prevalent belief. Some people say it's low carb. Some people say it's more fruits and vegetables. Some people say it's high volume, it's low ultra processed, whatever it is. I think that's a fantasy. I think we need to get over that and realize that for some people it's true, but for probably 2/3 of the adult population, including me, if you want to maintain a weight that you want to maintain, you're going to have to occasionally try to just eat a little less and not find the magical way of eating.
Yeah. Okay. The next one is one behavior with the strongest evidence for improving health span.
I would say the behavior with the strongest evidence for improving health span is to be of high socioeconomic status, if we can call that a behavior. And that's not a trivial statement. You know, it really goes back to getting away from the moralizing and what we want to be true or think should be true. What is? So if somebody were to say to me as a father, you have a choice. Now, of course, this is an artificial false dichotomy I'm creating. But if somebody were to say, for the sake of argument, you have a choice. You can fuss with your kids who don't really want to eat this very healthy stuff that you're going to make. You can cook the really healthy food for dinner, spend a lot of time doing that, spend a lot of time arguing with your kids to get them to eat it, and they'll be a little healthier because of that than, let's say, if you just took them to fast food every day. Or you could take them to fast food every day. They'll be happy. You make a deal. You say, I'll take you here. It'll be fast. It'll be quick. And that other time we're going to use to study math, general education, study math, reading, right? And the idea of Joe Limon, we're going to give you mastery over this. And you're going to get into Harvard, and you're going to become an anesthesiologist or an accountant or an attorney. Which is going to be better for your health? Eat the fast food, get into Harvard, become an anesthesiologist. That'll make you live longer. General education. I think we overestimate these importance of these very specific little nutritional things sometimes, and underestimate these big lifestyle things.
Very interesting response. I haven't expected it, but I think that's true. One longevity trend you are skeptical about.
I'm skeptical about the benefits of manipulating the gut microbiota as I won't say there's no effect, but as a major effector. I think that's a very much overhyped area with low rigor to date. I know we need to wrap up in just a minute or so, but I want to tell you how much I've enjoyed this, Gil.
Yeah, me too, but I have one more question.
One more.
Yeah. One principle scientists should follow to build public trust.
Recognize, accept, embrace, and practice that the one uncompromisable principle of science that is part of being in the vocation, as in the Latin vocare, to be called, calling, not just a job, calling as a scientist, is to the best of your ability, communicate truthfully, always. There's never a time when distorting the evidence or selectively reporting the evidence is okay.
Yeah, it's a great summary. David, thank you so much for the honest, rigorous, and evidence-driven discussion. Your work is a reminder that longevity science advances not through hype, but through discipline, transparency, and intellectual humility. For our listener, if you enjoyed today's episode of Longevity by Design, please like, follow, and leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. It's help others to find this conversation. Thanks for tuning to Longevity by Design, produced by InstaTracker. We'll see you next time. And again, David, thank you so much. That was a very exciting discussion, and I learned so much.
Thank you, Gil. It was an honor to be here with you on this wonderful podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Longevity by Design. Please subscribe to this podcast on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube. Longevity by Design is powered by Inside Tracker, a personalized health optimization platform that helps people improve their lives by improving their bodies from the inside out using personalized, science-backed recommendations for nutrition, supplements, and lifestyle changes. To learn more, visit insidetracker.com/podcast.